welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and I'm joined by a special guest this evening.
Greg, finally here, Greg.
Greg Westmoreland. We're gonna. Are you
There
okay
we
with
go.
the last name? Going
Yeah, that's
shout out
fine.
to the
Let's
crowd?
get formal. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get super formal. So what we're going to be talking about this evening is going to be the continuation of the dumpster fire cube. It is a cube where we have injected nothing but rares as a restriction, must be under $2, and it is 10 curators, one cube, where one of the curators is our good friend Greg here, who is now joined the audience with his experience in Magic. But before we go any further, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our refreshments of the show. Greg, what are you having this evening?
I'm having a Guinness, the best kind of Guinness. It's from Stu's Fridge.
Yes.
I didn't pay for it.
They taste better when they're free, don't they?
That's right.
Yes, they do.
Nice and cold.
And I am having a Southern Tier New Haze. It is a hazy smooth IPA. All right, let's go ahead and crack them open. And let's get to the topic. All right, so the topic tonight is going to be a condensed version. It's going to be talking about the additions that Greg has added, and to put it into perspective, I'm going to ask him a few key questions. We're going to start out with Greg. What was your process for making your choices to the cube?
Well, like you talked about on earlier episodes, it kind of mattered where you tagged in at, right? So I was kind of watching, we have a big group chat, which is very, very active that, you could put your phone down for 2 hours and come back and there's 120 messages. So a lot of people were contributing already. I was kind of keeping one eye on it. And then at a certain point, Anthony, you actually texted, we are super low on white and we're low on guilds. And I was like, I'm in, this is my job. Because I do feel like white's kind of something I enjoy more than a lot of other cube players. So I tried to do white some justice. I put a bunch of guild cards in. A lot of those ended up getting cut because I kind of went a little overboard. But.
Yeah, so as the proverbial bumper rails, as we talked about in previous episodes, in order to keep this project clean, I acted as the admin. I gave no rules, no restrictions to the curators as the added. What I instead did is I called audibles. And I would say this cube is going to be 450 cards, right? We're gonna represent guys. We're gonna do 450, but we're gonna do 4 guilds, right? And it was from everyone's binders. So people like Greg were pulling from their binders, as we said before, fervently trying to get in the game, right? And I was literally putting on lock. Myself and Chris Moore, as we talked about, being the veteran curators, having done this the most and owning the most cubes, we thought this was a great opportunity for people that, like Greg, admittedly so, has analysis through paralysis, where when people are generating so many cubes, I can understand. Trust me, I understand.
I've basically had the past at least couple years, I've somewhat built like 8, 9, 10 cubes on Cube Cobra and just haven't gotten over the hill of actually getting all put together. It's tough. It's a lot harder than you guys make it seem. I mean, I know you guys talk about how hard it is, but you get these ideas and then those ideas lead to other ideas and that idea didn't work out. And then, it's just really tough to really complete the process.
Right. So it's like building a board game from scratch. If I said, hey, you're on Project Risk, and I don't know what Risk means, but I want you as a curator or a game developer to go out and build me this game. I have this concept, and it's going to be rolling dice, and you're going to have armies, but I don't know much more than that. I'm going to finance this. Greg, I want you to develop this game system that people are going to enjoy, right? And he's a new intern at Hasbro or whatever, and I've thrown him this task of developing this game. I understand that it's a daunting task. It's not an easy interjection. When you're building a thematic cube, and I believe you were trying to design
there's been some.
It's an Alara cube.
That was my first attempt. Yeah, I love Shards of Alara. I loved playing Limited during that block. I love it to death. It's my all-time favorite block. And that was kind of the genesis was starting with that. And that might be one that would actually be easier to go back and complete. But since then, I've tried so many things, just stuff from different Limited mechanics I've liked over the years. To recently, I was trying to build a wedge cube, with all the different wedges. It's just a challenging thing, and I think in our play group here, we have a wonderful play group, but we have already 2 power cubes,
15.
We have 15 cubes, and it's and they're all fantastic, and it's you got to come with the heat. You know what I mean? You got to come with something cool.
You do and you don't. To retrospect on the conversations that I've had with our good friend May, who's joining the show a lot lately, right? And she has a lot of opinions about this, is just do it. And I can I can see where if you had to put it on a spectrum and put it on, I don't know, you were suddenly the MTGO featured cube, I can see where that would be the nightmare, right? Our good friend John from Cultic Cube has experienced that multiple times, and he reaches out even to his Discord groups and asks for feedback, because feedback is key to building a cube. But with this project, this is just an open lane project, right? We wanted your rares, your bulk rares.
Yeah.
We wanted your cards that have no worth, no value. They're not in an EDH. They're not a commander card.
Right.
You haven't put them in a cube because you just haven't got the. You don't want to break the ice on that idea. I understand that. I truly do.
Yeah.
It's challenging, right?
Yeah. It's tough when you're actually sitting down. I can't imagine doing it in the pre-Cube Cobra era, of actually sitting down and trying to put all these cards together and coming up with these different themes and stuff. But one thing I really liked about doing this was it was kind of like, Anthony, you were like, we need white cards and we need guilds. And I looked at what was in the cube already, and it was like, oh, white's hurting. And I also noticed like a lack of aggro. So I said, well, maybe white can be the aggro color. But it was fun to just go into my closet where all my unorganized stacks of cards are and just go in there and start pulling stuff out without thinking too much about it,
Right.
It's like, well, Anthony's, he's going to be the one figuring out how this all fits together. How can you build a
cube without analysis through paralysis? Well, we have found a way. And through this project, we've got 10 individuals in our group. And of that, you approximately have 6 of them that have never built a cube before. Or in that group, you have 6 of them that they're on the cusp of building a cube, but they do have that. I have concerns. I
think Stu's kind of in the same boat, right? We've both been kind of sitting around for a couple of years, pull out the laptop every once in a while, log into Cube Cobra. I got an idea. I start looking. We get about, I always do the mana first, which I should quit doing. Right. It's always like you spend all that time putting the 60 lands in, and it's like, now I'm looking for other cards, and it's like, well, now I hate this idea.
Because it kind of falls in that trap of, because Greg is a commander developer. He likes to build unique commander designs, and those are in that small sphere of repetition, concise. You're going to build a format that's built around a commander. Yeah. You have color restriction. You have all the elements, the ingredients of putting into a pot to build a cube, but I can see the challenge being is how do you expand that universe, right? I want to build a Bant or a Grixis commander, but how do I turn that into a game system? Outside of my field of play that's, sure, singleton, right? Sure, thematic based, but then I want to branch outside of that. You want to break the mold on that. Yeah. And, well, guess what, folks? Greg has now got off the fence, right? He's in it like the rest of them. And that's why I want to introduce, and we've been talking about this cube in a series of conversations where you've had curators, first-time curators, and some veteran curators, or maybe one or two, and they're honing their skills, like our good friend Christian Anderson, who has 2 cubes now. One where he's duplicated the Fey cube, and the other one where he's actually said, well, you know what? That's a really cool idea. I'm going to build a Bant enchantment cube. Because it is, and it's functional and it works and it's being tuned as
it's sick. It's super fast.
It's fast.
It is Cocaine Bear Cube.
It is hard. It is the most difficult cube in our circle for me to play. It is my weakness because I don't gravitate towards that idea. But when this idea came together, I didn't know if this is going to be a disaster. The initial hallmark or the benchmark that players kept asking me when I said dumpster fire cube is these cards aren't bad.
Right.
They're not bad because most rares and mythics, and that being our restriction, do something. Yeah. With the exception of a few that I've put in here because they have emotional connection to my original Growth of Magic. I'm the first curator. I'm the one that went deep. I put in some cards that are legitimately bad. But as the progression of this cube series builds, you can see that they got a chance to say, okay, they've built the groundwork, right? Yeah. And now I'm going to start doing the finish work. And Greg had the opportunity to go, well, there is a chance for me now to hone in some archetypes that I see weakness. And this is a developmental skill.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just a great exercise. I think talking about the dumpster fire cube, we didn't want it to be like, back in the day you could buy those draft boxes with, mystery draft. And it was all well and good until you got like a pack of legends or something in there. Playing with bad cards is not fun, right? But this is going to give cards that we rarely get to see that are actually, some pretty decent cards in there a chance to shine. I think it's going to be really neat.
And I would say that if I had to find a home, so we've talked about our good friend May on the show, who has a Fae Cube where she's embraced this Isle of Misfit toys, right? We talked about during our Christmas special, and then some. She's
that
inspired.
Cube is awesome. I've gotten to play
gorgeous,
it. It's great,
right?
Yeah.
And she's broken the mold, and with no fear whatsoever, put cards in there that maybe if you were molding or crafting off of or cloning the MTGO, you might go tisk tisk. This doesn't cut the mustard. This isn't a powerful card. But guess what? Cards' power levels are immediately, they're restricted and controlled by the environment in which they lie, right? Your ceilings and floors are defined by the architecture of the cube, not by the card's individual power level.
I got to play Chris's Soul Tie Cube for the first time a week or so ago, and I had just as much fun playing that as any Power Cube draft I've ever done.
It's gorgeous, right?
Yeah, it was amazing.
And we broke the mold. I built my Munson Cube, and he came up to me and he thanked me because mine's a Jund rock metal cube, and he's been sitting on the fence. See, this is how this works, right? And I'm encouraging other curators and or players in their group that are like, I'm hearing about this cube thing, and we talked about this in our What is Cube episode.
Yeah.
And that's a good question. What is cube? And it's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah,
the definition of it's not defined by the cards that lie within, but with the experience and the embracing of the fun within the environment. So let's get to some of these. Let's talk about some of these choices you had.
Yeah.
And because these are some of these cards are not going to be the ones that you're used to. We are going to read probably a choice 3 or 4 of each color that Greg has added to this one. And I'm going to start with this first one. I'm going to ask Greg to read it.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this one. This is Archpriest of Iona. I believe Archpriest is the right way to pronounce it. It's a 1 mana, 1 white mana creature, human cleric. Archpriest of Iona's power is equal to the number of creatures in your party. So that consists of up to 1 each cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. So, like I said, and it has 2 toughness. So the power is equal to the number of creatures in your party. If it's by itself, it's going to be a 1/2. So it's going to come down as a 1/2 on turn 1. So I think that this card, first of all, I like party a lot. I hope they print more support for it in the future. It needs more support, right? But to be good at a format like Commander. But I just think it's a neat mechanic. I think it's fun. I could see this card just blowing up a random game, and just somehow being a 3/4 on turn 3 you're bashing in there. And like I said, I think there's a lot less aggro in this cube than normal. And that could really take over a game quick. So I'm hoping for some cool stories to come out of casting this card.
Yeah, so that's what's neat about this is some of these cards, because Greg is our final person to submit the physical cards.
That's right.
Just to know that we built this in a digital format using Cube Cobra as our selected, and I admin them and I gave them the proverbial bumper lanes, and I called the shots and I called the audibles, and we did soft cuts, myself and Chris Moore, to round this out. But with no guidance whatsoever, we allowed would-be curators to come into the fold, right? No restrictions, just give me a card. And it acted as a signpost. So this card beckons for clerics, rogues, warriors, and wizards, right? I started doing the count. My brother Josh and I were talking about this, that he was going to add this card too. And I had to say, nope, it's too late. Already, you missed the cut on this card.
That's awesome.
And he did it also, he did it blind. He didn't do the studying that you did. And as we've learned, I've done the this has been an interesting, not only a cube curation entry level type of cube, this has also been a social experiment in so many words. To see if the new people, the ones that, we're going to call them the muggles, right? Whether or not they wanted to study the cube or they wanted to go blind. Our good friend Christian admitted that he went blind he likes tokens.
Well, that's so Christian, right?
It is. He's a chaos player.
We need him.
You need a player that's little chaotic, right?
Little cayenne pepper, little spice on it.
Little.
Yes.
Right. He went deep on it. And you know what? This card, it found a home because I without even scrolling through I'm using the filtration we tagged using the Cube Cobra's tools. And as I went through and built this cube, I tagged ownership. We're just going to pretend that the band breaks up someday. It'll never break up. But you know what?
Never.
Maybe somebody says I moved to Omaha, Nebraska, and I got to take my $1.30 worth of cards with me, and they want to break up the band, right? So out of respect, and also it's just cool to see the additions, because the additions and subtractions are going to come from these individuals. Greg is responsible for adding this card, but he was hoping that the other curators would follow suit and catch on to the party mechanic, which is very Fey Cube oriented. He sent a signal that maybe the other players, the Christians and the Joshes of the world, may or may not pick up on. But the worst case scenario, the floor of this card is a 1/2.
Right, for one in a cube where there's not a lot of 1 drops, not a ton of 2 drops.
So it has a home
it can
regardless.
Get down.
But it could be...
It could wear some equipment.
But it could have been or not been anything, right? So that's what's so neat about the flavor of this card.
Imagine having a full party and getting that +1/+1 and flying and winning off that.
Yes.
That'd be amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as this cube develops and finds iterations, because what I'm going to ask the curators to do, and I'm going to hold my stance. I'm going to ask Chris Moore to hold his stance on his choices. But the others, as we do play reps and feedback and say, this card's too powerful, this card's too weak.
Right.
I'm going to ask them to go back to their binders and then provide the cube another, opportunity to advance.
So if your card gets cut, you're going to be the one to replace it.
Yes.
Basically. Okay, I think
it's a good stance, right?
Yeah.
You have ownership of the
Then you're not having to feel bad from getting your card. Oh, that's fine. I get to go pick out another card.
We did initial cuts just based on this card doesn't have a home, doesn't fit, too powerful. Chris and I did this, but going forward, we've got a nice mold, but we're curious to see so that you take ownership and you go, well, this card is probably an outlier.
Yeah.
All right, go back to your binder.
I think that's cool. I remember, this is kind of off subject a little bit, but listening to the episode with you and Christian, you were talking about how you and Chris were cutting cards. And you were like, you got to the point where you kind of had to not worry about, making people feel bad and stuff. And you were explaining, why the cuts were made. And I was listening to it and I was like, I didn't feel bad about any of the cuts. And then I thought about it some more and I was like, but what if they would have cut like trading posts?
Yeah.
I would have been like kind of salty, you know what I mean? So an idea that I had that just for other people that want to do this is just me spitballing an idea, is maybe come up with a system of like, hey, you get to have 3 or 4 cards that you're going to submit that are guaranteed in. What are your 3 or 4 pet cards that you know what I mean? I think that could be a potential system.
Because this is going to be, we talked about it was a dictatorship in the beginning, but it never was, right?
Right.
It's going to be a community project. So going forward, I'm going to ask for feedback. Hey, we're considering cutting this next card. Would you like to talk about this one?
Which one? Guardian of Faith here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read it real quick. It's 3 mana, 1 and 2 white. Flash, Vigilance. When Guardian of Faith enters the battlefield, any number of other target creatures you control phase out. And it's a 3/2. So it's really good.
It's really good. And it's not too good, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not on the cuts. But what if it became a cut? We would talk it out and find out that maybe you should run Remorseful Cleric instead, which is on the list. And I will share these in the show notes so you can see Greg's additions and understand his logic and what he was studying as this cube developed. So Greg was 5th of 10 curators. He got in the middle of the game, so he got to see, he was midway through the evolution of the cube. So he set the trajectory of other curators that were new to the scene, because as we progressed, some of these curators had not had an opportunity to submit cards, which makes this such an interesting choice. So Guardian of Faith is an amazing addition. It's a good way to the Flash and the Vigilance alone for a 3/2
it's an interesting card. Yeah.
It's powerful. It's interesting. It's a Nagachi card. You could do a lot of things with this. You can be defensive, or it's either proactive or reactive, depending on how you play this card. And it's a great addition. This next one that he added that I want to point out, we kind of went through this call out of, hey, there's too many wraths, because it seems like the binders were rolling out a lot of wraths. And there was a period of the great wraths. And I mean, I was getting to 20, 30. And
a lot of rares and mythics. I mean, that's where they lie
mythics,
at.
Right? And they were coming in at 5 mana value, 6 mana value, 7 mana value. And we made some executive decisions. But because he got in early enough with some interesting cards, I decided as the bumper lanes and myself and Chris Moore, to make some calls. And I want to talk about this card right here. And I'm going to have Greg kind of discuss his logic before adding this one.
Sure, this is a classic. Well, first, I love how it sounds like I'm putting so much thought into it, but I'm like literally yanking cards.
We're going to make believe.
Yeah,
but listeners, there was curation technique.
There was a little bit. But this card to me is just a sweet card. It's Terminus. It's 4 colorless and 2 white. It's a sorcery. Put all creatures on the bottom of their owner's libraries, and you can miracle it for 1 white mana. What I like about Terminus, and I like this about Hallowed Burial too, but Terminus is a little cooler than Hallowed Burial with the Miracle. I think just puts it a little bit over the top for me, is it just answers a lot of stuff that no other card in the game can answer sometimes. It's just... It's
an exile-ish effect, right? Because you're number 5.
Right, and it's just an interesting effect. A game that you think you could have totally won, and I just think it makes for some good stories.
I do. I 100% agree. Yeah. It's a good board wipe. It's a healthy board wipe. Mm-hmm. And then we have this next card that I'd like for him to discuss, because as he mentioned, he really supplemented the white section. Yeah. Midway through this cube curation, I'm calling out white's low.
Mm-hmm. It was extremely low.
It's low. It was coming in like the whites were all wraths. So I had to make... And I had just a massive amount of those. And armies, as we talked about, must march. The game exchange must happen. Players want to enjoy the experience. So this next card really falls in alignment with, believe it or not, Christian Anderson's choices. And we've got a theme here now that has emerged. What would you like to talk about this card, please?
Yeah, sure. This is Horn of Valhalla. This is an equipment artifact, but it also has the adventure mechanic. So the adventure side of it is Guard's Call, probably saying that wrong. And that costs X, white. It's a sorcery, adventure, create X, 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. And then for the other half of the card, it's a 2 mana artifact equipment, 1 colorless, 1 white. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. So this is, if we're playing a grindy game here, if we wind up in a grindy game, I mean, this can just take over the game. You can cast the adventure side, maybe make, 6 tokens, and then the next turn you've got this equipment that's going to come down and give whatever it equips +6/+6.
Yeah.
So it's
go wide, go high strategy. Right. It's got a lot going on here.
Yeah, and there's going to be instances where you don't cast the sorcery part at all. I think adventures are really flexible. I think they're great for limited. They're really interesting cards, and they just lead to interesting game states and interesting decisions that you have to make.
So as all these tokens are being generated, there's a card that I just want to breeze over here, but I will include in the show notes that does counter both because the token strategy did emerge, which is wonderful. And we've yet to purchase all the tokens, and I have a plethora of tokens in my binder.
Wow.
But we do have to token up this cube. We weren't expecting this, but between Greg and Christian Anderson, a good friend of the show, we've got this wonderful, just massive army of tokens. So Greg did add in as Declaration of Stone. Yeah. This card just gets cards of the same name. Yeah. And it's a token hater. And most people are very familiar with that card. And I will share it in the show notes. I don't want to over talk about it, but it does exile it's a token hater, right? It's powerful, right? So once you realize what I like about the face value of that card is it gets the singular card, you name it, right? You take it out of the game, but in addition to those go wide strategies where you've got a whole bunch of soldier tokens or skeletons or whatever may emerge in this cube as we develop it, they won't. There's counterbalance that has naturally occurred, and this is again number 5. Christian came in even later in the game. I think he was number 8, right? But he said he went blind, but I don't know if there's so much truth to that because he fed off of a lot of the ideas.
Interesting.
It's interesting how this is all rolled out, right? Yeah. It's a beautiful cube. One of the problems that we did experience is mana, right? And
Yeah.
the connection of mana. Again, Christian talked about during his episode that a lot of the mana rocks that you really want to connect the dots,
Common, uncommon.
they're common, uncommon, right? And I would like for Greg to reach over to this card. 'Cause this card is actually a card that would just get bypassed and overlooked.
Right.
But it fixes the problem, right? What do you got here,
This
Greg?
this is one that was buried deep in a
And I've
rare
got
binder.
10, 15 of these cards.
I haven't thought about this card or touched this card. I can't even believe I found it. And I pulled it out and I was like, oh, this is great. And well, I'll go ahead and read it first. The card is Realm Right. It's a 1/1 creature for 1 blue mana. As it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. Lands you control are the chosen type in addition to their other types. So again, this goes back to I wanted to get some more 1-drops in there and low mana in there, and then this is going to come down, and I'm playing a Soul Tide deck and not drawing any of my forests. Boom! Now all my lands are forests in addition. So this can really fix your mana in a pinch, and I just think it's just a neat card. The art's great. I've always just attracted to this card, and I'm like, this fits here. In addition, it's a wizard.
Yeah,
which can
and
work
it falls
with party.
into that. Yeah.
Right.
You see what you did? These synergies.
Yeah.
As this cube is developed and we got new curators. And again, one more time, this has been a experiment, not only social, but also hyper affordable. This cube is so cheap.
Right.
Aside from the fact that you just got these from your binders, aside from the fact that you didn't matter what block you took these from, what group you took these from, before after blocks were even a thing, right? Mm-hmm. And granted, power level and power creep, all that's happened. I believe this is from Return to Ravnica or something.
Yeah, one of those.
Doesn't matter. It solved a problem, and it solved a problem that maybe Greg may have put some thought into, may have not have, but we knew that mana rocks were non-existent at the rare and mythic level, right? So we had to solve a problem, and the cube was accessible, affordable, and just. We wanted something that we could build that the community could emulate. Right. And I want to go back to the Fate Cube. Mm-hmm. What she has embraced is building a board game type state, the Isle of Misfit Toys, that is accessible to anyone. Mm-hmm. And so that was the rule set. We do not pass $2.
Yeah.
This cube has...
Which I did a few times on accident.
And
right?
that was some of our cuts, right? That was when people crossed the bridge.
Because I wasn't looking at prices for some of these. Some of them seemed like there's no way this costs more than $2.
Right. And we're looking at the lowest printings, and we're going to work on that. But as we curate this cube and develop it more, we're going to try to streamline this price to make this a highly accessible cube for, hey, if you want to pull in a cube, we want to give you another access point, right? That's the whole idea here. The next card that I would like Greg to talk about, he's filling in some gaps. And white was his primary objective. Right. That's what when the shout out was coming that white was faltering, I asked him to put some cards in here. And then we moved on to other colors, and this is where he found another card that you may find in some powered vintage environments. Mm-hmm. And it's super strong. And I'd like Greg to talk about this card. Yeah, you will. But you do and you don't. But this card, I love this card. King Kong at home,
It's
right?
really that simple. It's just, we're talking about Kolga, the Titan Ape. He's 3 colorless and 3 green. And he's a 7/6. The art is fantastic. And when he enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Whenever he attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls, and you can pay 1 and a green and return target human you control to his owner's hand, and he gains indestructible until end of turn.
And when I queried this cube, humans are prevalent. Again, this is
they're going to be.
It's through happenstance, right?
Right.
And that's what's so neat about this is that I can actually filter not only by player name and creature type, but it's another one's going to hit a lot of targets, right? And again, this is OG King Kong.
I was proud of this inclusion. I really was, because it's just sweet, man. Like if you don't like this card, you need to go to the store and get a personality, because like this card's just. I mean, it's just an awesome Magic card. It's not something we see in Commander. We definitely don't see in Cube a lot. And it's just a cool chance for this card to get a chance to shine. I think.
100%. Yeah. And then we got some other cards in here that are recursive, like Master of Death, and we've got Shaman of the Great Hunt that's not recursive, but really powerful.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it really feeds into these ideas. And then we have a Rod of the Silencer, which is one of my favorites. Actually, my powered vintage, just because it's a roll of the dice, and whenever it hits,
she's
it's
cool.
strong.
And
you want to talk about this card?
Well, I will say, without getting into her and Declaration of Stone and some other inclusions, I was looking for any kind of single target removal that you could find at rare.
Yeah.
Because there's just not a ton of it, especially under $2. Because you're thinking about like Assassin's Trophy and Vindicate and Maelstrom Pulse. Those cards are, they're not gonna be under $2
until they get reprinted.
Well, yeah, possibly, yeah.
But until then,
right. It's
and
tough to find.
And as we get more sets that roll out and more opportunities to get cards, and some of the stipulations we put on this is we were not looking for rarity mythic cards that were special editions, right? Like Strixhaven when they went to their special edition.
Yeah.
That came up a lot in our conversation.
Okay.
We got some boos, right? People would add in cards and go, well, this was printed at rare. And I'm like, yeah, it's counterspell. Yeah. We can't put that in there, right? So we did put some rule sets, right? And the rule sets, I think, made the critical thinking come online. And
that's really the restriction can breed creativity, right?
And that has been said by Morrow numerous times, and that's not a new concept, right? Is that whenever we're forcing people to make decisions based on previous curators and then wondering what signposts they're going to generate for the next curators, because you're midway point, right, we expanded to 10, which is beautiful, and it's just such a wonderful project and such an interesting idea, and I want to reiterate, accessible and affordable, and a good way to introduce people to this idea. And so Planeswalkers was an idea So when we did Planeswalkers, Chris Moore and I, once again, the people who've been doing this the longest, had to put some rails on the Planeswalkers. Want to make sure they weren't locking up games. But this Planeswalker is another one. Just you won't see in a powered vintage environment.
Right.
It won't show up on the MTGO. You want to talk about this one here, please?
Yeah, I could talk about it. The Planeswalker is Sarkhan the Mad, and he's Rakdos colored. He's 3 colorless, 1 black, 1 red. I remember this card when it came out. I was just like, this card is sweet, And it wasn't in a way of like, this card's going to take over standard, or this card's going to, but it's just a sweet card. Do you want me to go through the abilities? Or
yeah, do it.
It's so he starts out with 7 loyalty. He has no way to add loyalty. So for his top ability, costs 0 loyalty. It's reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. He deals damage to himself equal to that card's converted mana cost. So he's basically giving you a Bob effect. On that one. His -2 is where it really gets going. Target creature's controller sacrifices it. Then that player puts a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And I have seen this used on an opponent.
Yeah.
They just have such a problematic creature that you're like, no, I would rather you have a 5/5 dragon. And then his -4, each dragon creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target player. So I just think it's a neat card. I mean, I don't know if Flame Blast Dragon made it in or something like that, but imagine pumping a Flame Blast Dragon and hitting that -4 and just delving somebody for 12. It's on the list.
People are begging for Flame Blast to come back.
That could really take over a game.
It could. We have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, that's I remember playing against Flame Blast in a limited format, like in a block draft, and it was a house.
Yeah.
An absolute house. But Sarkhan the Mad, it's just a really, I mean, a lot of my picks were like, this is a really neat card that I don't ever really think got its chance to shine.
Yeah.
So this is a chance. We're going a little bit lower on the power end here. Maybe some cool stories can come out of playing with this card. Maybe it can just get that moment in the sun.
I think this cube is about cool stories.
Yeah, it's about your pet cards, man.
It is. Some of these games are they might be swingy, they might be haymaker.
Yeah.
But you know what I think, based on the additions that curators like yourself have added, it's not going to be the doldrums of Magic. No one's going to walk away going, that was a boring game.
No.
Things are going to happen. They're going to be nuts, right? And that's what we're wanting. This is an experiment.
Right.
And I think this is a really cool experiment. Yeah. So how are you going to cast Kolga? Well, he answered that with Mina Den, right?
Yeah,
You're gonna slap
yeah.
it. So you can't do Oracle Moldai, right? Cost a lot of money.
Right.
So how do you solve that? Well, Mina Den. And Mina Den for the Wildborn, for 2 colorless and Gruul, you get a legendary creature, elf ally. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Granted, you're not looking at the top of your library. You don't have that type of advantage. I get it. But you can play Gruul again and return a land you control to its owner's hand. Target creature gains trample until the end of the turn. So that dragon you just made with Sarkin the Mad
Yeah.
now synergizes with the blocker that you throw up a spirit or a token or whatever, because we have to study this, right? You can now give it trample by doing some janky nonsense. So you can go Jund and have fun, right? That's what's so cool about this cube. And then we've got this huge gotcha card. And this is a fan favorite. This is a EDH, like, oh, you remember that time you lost an EDH?
Yeah.
You know why you lost? You lost a Rubble Hulk.
Yeah,
because it hits you. And I'm not going to talk about this card. We're going to straight to the blood rush of it. And for 1 colorless and Gruul, discard Rubble Hulk. Target attacking creature you control gets +X until end of the turn, while X is the number of lands you control. These games are going to be slower, more meticulous, more thought out. We're playing chess,
and then
not
Rubble
checkers,
Hulk's just going to come smash you and take over the game. Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk about, I'm dying to talk about another card right here.
Yeah. This is just I just love this card, man. And okay, the card that we're talking about is Glare of Subdual. It's 2 colorless, a green and a white. It's an enchantment, tap an untapped creature you control, tap target artifact or creature. So this card is almost opposition. It doesn't hit any permanent like opposition does. It's only artifact or creatures. I could see this card being problematic in this cube, but I think Selesnya is one of those color combinations that I've always never wanted to play in cube, you know, because it's just, if I'm in Selesnya, something went really wrong. So I kind of wanted to give Selesnya something a little bit higher on the power. You know, this is a card I could see myself first picking.
I would first pick it. So I actually run this in my horror genre cube because the art's mildly disturbing.
Selesnya is good in that
It's
cube.
a little disturbing, right?
Yeah.
And it feeds into token strategies.
Right.
Again, whether or not the others looked at it, you gave them signposts that they have fed into. And that's what's so interesting about this card. It's not quite, you know, it's not going to get lands. It's not as broken, but it's going to do the things that opposition-esque, right? And some of these strategies, in order to get through, Armies Must March, you've given them a path.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this is an interesting one here that I would like to talk about if we start moving towards. Yeah.
So when we drafted Chris's Sultai Cube the other week, the pack I opened, pack 1, pick 1, I looked at it and I put a card down and I said, I just first picked a card. I will first pick every time I see it.
Yeah.
And at the end, when we got done drafting, I flipped the card over and it was Birthing Pod. Now, Birthing Pod's over $2.
Yeah.
But Prime Speaker Vanifer is not. And if you don't know about Prime Speaker Vanifer, she's a 4-mana Simic card, 2 colorless, a green and a blue. And she's a 2/4. She has that. Not that that matters at all. She has the ability tap, sacrifice another creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. You can only activate it when you can cast a sorcery. It's basically Birthing Pod on a creature. It's just an effect that I cannot resist. And so I ended up in that Sultai Cube with her and with Birthing Pod, and it was relevant.
And it's a dynamic. It adds a level of dynamicism to this cube because again, these cubes aren't going to do these cards aren't going to do nothing. This gives you some really interesting choices as a curator.
Yeah.
And you get to mold your experience around this. And if you drafted this, I know you're locking yourself in, but you could pack 1, pick 1 this, and then do a build around. I would have a lot of fun just for the lulz, right? Because Cube's intended to do this. And then we're going to move over to the last card. Now I want him to defend his last card. And if you notice, this is not cut. Now I want you to talk about this card.
This is a pet card. This is the one I said would hurt my feelings if it got cut a little bit. I'd get over it in 4 to 6 months. But this card is Trading Post. It's an artifact, 4 colorless. It has 4 abilities. They all cost 1 colorless mana, and you tap Trading Post to do them. The first one is discard a card, you gain 4 life. The second one is pay 1 life. You put a 0/1 white goat creature token onto the battlefield. The third one is sacrifice a creature, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And the last one is sacrifice an artifact, draw a card. This card is just... I remember playing this in the core set draft where it was in. I don't think it'll be as powerful here, but it was just such a versatile card.
Yeah.
You know, this could fit into a ton of different decks, and it's just fun when an ability... another card that I really loved playing in Alara block was the Obelisk of Alara.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that. It's just like, you don't know when the ability is going to matter. You don't know when you're going to need to discard a card to gain 4 life. That comes up. You know, you're never in a great spot when that comes up, but that might win you the game, you know? And then, you know, putting a goat out there. Are we playing aristocrats? Are we gonna be using goats to sacrifice, you know, or do we just need to recur our artifacts? What do we need to do? And the trading post can do it all. And it's just a fun card.
Fascinating, versatile, generic utility that when this was planted as the midway curator, it didn't have to other people pick up on it. This card's just going to always do something, right? And then as we progressed, we learned that discarding a card's pretty good because while there's not Reanimator, there's a light interaction with graveyards that progressed. If you need to get life and get a blocker, you can because you made this little goofy goat. You can sacrifice creatures. We don't have aristocrats. So they didn't get signpost and signal. But you know what? You can bring some artifacts back to your hand.
That'd be by what you need, yeah.
But they do exist, right? Yeah. And then you can also sacrifice some of your spent mana artifacts that you don't need anymore and draw a card. It gave you curator versatility, and this card fits that nice mold.
It fits into the category of like, I just want there to be cards in here where someone plays them and they'll be like, holy crap, I can't believe how good Trading Post was that game. I have, you know... And just had those stories come out of Cube. That's a big part of what Cube is about to me, is discovering these little surprises and just having these stories after you get to play with the card, and it can take over a game. Yeah, Trading Post. Happy with that one.
All right, so that kind of concludes our episode where we're covering Greg's addition to the Dumpster Fire Cube. And what you've learned is that 10 curators, 1 cube can be functional with the restriction of not only dollar value, rarity restriction, etc. It's been a fun experience to interject new players into the cube scene, right? You want to bring people in that are unfamiliar, on the fence, frankly, just too nervous to present their cube idea. This is a wonderful way to encourage them to show that it's not that hard. Just takes a little bit of thought, a little bit of conversation, feedback, and it's a learning opportunity. And that's what we've got out of this. So this series will continue as this cube progresses, but I just think this is a wonderful opportunity to get something out to the cube community that everybody could replicate, right? If you have dollar budgetary restrictions, etc., this is a way into the idea. And feedback it's open, right? It's tangible because the other curators are giving you their concepts live. You got 5 players, you could do the same thing. You got 2 players, you theoretically do the same thing, right? You don't have to scale to 10 and just build a cube together jointly and talk it out. It's a very feedback-oriented concept that I think is a great way to bring people into the fold. But other than that, we've had a great time. I want to thank Greg for joining the show.
All right, thanks for having me, man. I had a great time.
This is wonderful.
Super proud of you guys for the podcast. You guys are doing an awesome job. Hopefully we'll be back after I've built my first cube by myself.
Oh, yeah, we're looking forward to that Alara cube. All right, we're going to move over to the socials. If you love the show, we would truly, truly appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite player. And as we mentioned before, if you want to bling out your cube environments, UberCube is now an Alter Sleeves affiliate where you can get 5% off using the UberCube link that we're going to provide in the show notes. In addition, we use ink playmats for everything we order. All of our playmats that are customized, dice bags, etc. You can also find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also reach us at UberCubeMTGPodcast at gmail.com. You can link us on Discord, #UberCube. You can also find us on Patreon, landing page UberCube. And other than that, we really truly appreciate you supporting the show and allowing new curators to come onto the show. I think it gives us diversity of insight. This has been wonderful. And we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is Happy Cubing!